So today's conversation is probably, as most of you know, is focused on something that we are kind of experiencing in one way or the other. And whether we are talking about changes in organization, or we are talking about like new leadership or restructuring, or even geopolitical tensions and changes, we can say that uncertainty became, I think, part of our professional and personal lives. And I'm sure many of you here can relate to this. And I believe we all agree that the question is not just about how do we handle these situations and how do we deal with uncertainty ourselves, but it's also about how do we make sure that we support people who are around us throughout this uncertainty. And today we are here, we want to explore how cultural intelligence, or what we call CQ, can help us navigate these uncertainties with kind of great empathy, connection. And for all of those of you who are new here with us today, I just want to reflect on cultural intelligence, or CQ, and cultural intelligence is actually a capability to relate and work effectively with people who are different from us in any kind of aspect, whether we're talking about different communicational styles or backgrounds or experiences or even perspectives. So today we just want to explore how this capability can help us and be essential tool in times of uncertainty, change, or transition. I want to say hello everyone again and welcome. I see a lot of people are coming in the past 2 minutes and coming from all over the place. We have also Ed from South Africa. Hello, Ed. We see people from Hungary, Belgium. And it's great to have you all from all over the place. Before we officially begin this whole conversation today, I would love to introduce myself shortly. My name is Iva Peronicic, and I'm the General Manager for Europe and the Middle East here at Cultural Intelligence Center, and I'm also a CQ Certified Facilitator. And personally, this whole topic of uncertainty, I can say that it resonates deeply with me, because for the past 14 years, I've lived and worked across many different countries and many different cultures. And I actually recently relocated to Dubai, UAE. So this conversation is not just professional for me, it's also very personal and real. And I'm very excited and very happy to be joined today by two incredible speakers who will bring rich perspectives and experiences to this conversation. So I would love to give a floor to Quentin and Sharon. Thank you so much for being here. And I'd love to invite you to just introduce yourself to our audience. Maybe we can start with Sharon.
Oh, thanks, Eva. Well, welcome everybody. I hope this conversation between not just the three of us, but between all of you also online will help every one of us, because cultural intelligence is a journey. There's no endpoint. We're consistently refining those skills and getting better at it. My name is once again Sharon Lim. I am from Malaysia, but currently living in the US. So we also have uncertainty here. And from those of us in the US, and I think the rest of the world, I mean, we all know about what is going on. It is an interconnected world. My background is really from the corporate world. I worked in multinational business, global, for quite a while. And then I'm also an educator. I have a master's in teaching as well. And I've also worked in schools. So I've, sort of seen how, and from a cultural intelligence perspective, it's always helped me in terms of looking at just differences and really understanding myself in terms of how I respond to those differences. My background is I grew up in, as I said, Malaysia is very multicultural for those who've been there. My own family is very multicultural. My father is Sri Lankan Chinese. My mother is Irish German. So I also grew up in a culture that was just was exposed to it at a very early age. So and that was what took me in my professional career and what has taken me to cultural intelligence as well. And as I look back, it's helped me understand how I responded to things and what was going on around me growing up and even in the business world. So with that, um, I will turn it over to Quinton, and then hopefully from there we can all, start having good conversations.
So,
Thank
to my South African colleagues and friends on the call, Ola Eta Vatse, Sawubona to my friend Buchle Glamini, that's in Canada. And my name is Quinton Pretorius, happy and glorious. And it's really nice to be back with the Cultural Intelligence Center, talking about cultural intelligence and what it means for an uncertain world. And I know lots of you are going to laugh at me because it's winter in South Africa. So I've got my Basutu blanket on my lap, keeping me warm. And I know Buchle is already laughing at me because he knows that this is not real winter for him sitting up there in Canada. But it's really great to be here. And I think when we think about uncertainty, we live with it in South Africa all the time. So really excited to be part of this conversation today.
Thank you. Thank you both. And thank you for making us all laugh, Quinton. And Sharon, listening to the diverse background that you have. Actually, we already have one question for you. Maybe you can quickly reflect on that. And somebody is asking, what culture do you identify yourself with, and in what setting? I'm sure this is because what you shared about your wonderful diverse background.
That's thank you for that question, because that's a question as I was growing up, working through trying to understand my identity, and how I have come to think about it is I grew up in Malaysia. I grew up with my grandmother. She was Chinese, so I say I'm Chinese Malaysian, and that is the culture I identify with. Although and then later years I went to Australia, went to boarding school in Australia, but the formative years was what shaped me, and that's sort of where I gravitate to, despite the fact that I have lived in America for quite a while. And it's very interesting, that question, and it's a long answer. When I go back home and I call Malaysia home, my family will say the American is here. I look at and I think, I have, and that is where from a cult, and I look at it, of course, from a cultural intelligence perspective, your environment shapes you. So
Mm.
that is where, as a CQ practitioner, I'm always thinking, and when I interact with people, your environment shapes you. So the longer you are in an environment, it conditions you. So when you get out of that environment, that's where the CQ comes in. That's where it helps you look at it from a different perspective and do a lot of reflection. But yeah, if I had to summarize, I a lot of my traditions, a lot of how I hold dear to me is very Malaysian. And as I said, I grew up with my Chinese grandmother, so that is sort of what I relate to.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you for this beautiful answer. And I must say that I cannot even agree more with you, because how we progress and how we move across different cultures and countries, this definitely shapes our preferences, our personality, and kind of makes us unique, right? So thank you for that. And thank you both for the introduction. I'm very excited about today's conversation. I think you both know that. And I believe there's no better place to start this conversation than, let's say, talk about the broader context we are all experiencing right now. So uncertainty kind of became a defining part of many individuals, teams, organizations in today's world. So maybe to open this conversation, I'll start with a question for both of you. What is the role of cultural intelligence in an uncertain world from your perspective? Quinton, do you want to start on this
Yeah,
one?
I'm happy to start off. And I've been thinking about this question for a while. And I had the privilege of engaging with an individual by the name of Adwan Singhal, a PhD doctor on leading voice around education and entertainment and facilitation. And we had a really wonderful conversation. And he shared 3 stories with me that I'd love to share with you as we think about CQ and uncertainty. And so he started by saying, when we're navigating uncertainty, whether you dropped in the middle of the desert in Africa somewhere, and you're trying to figure out your bearings, you normally need 3 points to get your bearings to make your way through uncertainty. And so he shared 3 stories. I just want to share 3 stories as potential points to help us navigate uncertainty. So the first one was a story he shared about Mother Teresa. And he said that at a particular time in her life, she wanted to take a time off, and she took a retreat, and she tried to sneak into the United States without anybody knowing that she was there. And so when she arrived at the airport, there was this big group of people that they were there to meet her. And so so she couldn't get in under the radar and just be on her retreat. And so as she arrived, it was 1974, the year I was born, that the story happens. And she arrives in the United States. It's in the midst of the Vietnam War, and there's massive protests happening in the United States against the Vietnam War. And so her followers say, Mother, will you join us tomorrow as we protest against the Vietnam War? And she said, I will absolutely not join you in a protest against the Vietnam War. And they were a little bit confused. And they said, are you sure you won't join us? She said, I will not join you if you're fighting against the Vietnam War. But if you tell me that you're standing for peace, I will be in the front of the pack with you. And so that's the first thing that we need to think about as we're navigating uncertainty, is what are we standing for? And so as I begin to think about that, the CQ Center and cultural intelligence allows us to stand for something rather than against something. And so that is the first piece that I'm thinking about around what is the Cultural Intelligence Center or cultural intelligence allow us to fight for? And if I just think about the definition of cultural intelligence, it's about creating skills to be effective in multicultural situations, and that's what we are. We are creating skills for people to not fight against that, but for standing with that. It's about curiosity, respect, learning, human connection. Those are the things that we, as CQ practitioners on this call today, we are standing for those things. And so maybe we're not fighting against something, but we're standing for something. So that's the first one. The second story that Dr. Adwan Singhal shared with us was a story about Mahatma Gandhi. Now, if you know the story about Mahatma Gandhi, he was a lawyer working in South Africa, and he got on the train and he was kicked off the train because he was sitting in first class. And because he was Indian, he was told to get off the train because he needed to sit in third class. And that started his whole journey of fighting for freedom. And so when he gets to India, he starts his whole independence against the UK, and he starts his whole thing. And he's wearing these clothes that he's wearing, and he starts driving in third class in Indian trains. And so his family members and friends were saying, Dr. Adwan said it so beautifully. He said, Babu, why are you driving in third class? Like, after all, when you were in South Africa, you were fighting to go into first class. Like, why do you drive in third class? And he turned to his family and friends and said, I drive in third class because there is no fourth class. And so I thought that was such a powerful story, which talks about the values we stand for. And when we go through uncertainty, it's what are the principles that drive us? Because sometimes when we're in uncertainty, if we don't have those values that drive us, it becomes really easy to capitulate or to become really lost around that. And so as I think about cultural intelligence, it gives me real principles to make particular decisions. What does respect look like in these moments? Who do I need to be or hear in these moments when things are feeling a little bit out of control? And then the third story, because I'm South African, Dr. Adwan didn't share this story, but I'm sharing because I suppose I need to talk about something South African a little bit more, is about the Springboks, our rugby team. I'm not a big rugby supporter. I know very little about rugby, but the little bit I do know is that in 2016, the South African rugby team had its worst performance ever. It was the worst period in South African history of South African rugby. They were losing. I think they had the biggest defeat against New Zealand. It was a 57-0 loss. And fans were becoming disconnected. It was just feeling like the team was under pressure. And then Rassie Erasmus came, the new coach of the Springboks, and he changed things around. But this wasn't just about a technical reboot, but it was about building a culture within this team. And it was really about building trust, standards, clarity. And it was really about building a team that could rely on one another. And so after they built that, they won their first game in New Zealand after 9 years. They are two World Rugby Cup champions back to back. They're now one of the best World Cup rugby teams in the world. And what it talks to is about a sense of community. And so I think the third thing that CQ offers us, all 159 of us on the call today, is a sense of community. That when things are really tough, if I stand by myself, it's going to be really difficult. But if I know that I have a community that I can come alongside with, that makes all the difference. So those are the three stories. What are we standing for? What are the principles that drive our decisions? And what is the community that I'm with? And I think if we have those three things, which CQ provides, either through the capabilities and the training or just through the CQ Center, it will help us navigate the uncertainty that we find ourselves with at the moment.
So beautiful, Quinton. Thank you so much. I think I can see audience's reactions. I really enjoyed your storytelling. And these are all such a powerful points. And I cannot agree more that, especially on the first point, that what we stand for is really, really important to kind of question and think about in times of uncertainty. Sharon, would you like to add anything on this question?
Well, I think, Quinton, as you were just sharing sort of the three principles, and I didn't sort of indicate where I'm located in the US. I'm actually in Minnesota, and we have just gone through that with the whole issue with ICE and immigration. And for those on the call who are from in the US, you probably have seen, read it, and felt some of it as well, because it wasn't just exclusive. What was going on was not exclusive to Minnesota, but we did come together. And yeah, and what you articulated was really what happened. The values, the sense of community, and people came together. And March in freezing, you think you're cold, Quinton, try coming. Minnesota in winter, that's real cold. I don't know about Johannesburg. But anyway, with that, I agree. And the other thing I was also thinking about, just drawing from my experience in the corporate world, in organizations. And I've thought of, just in preparation for this webinar as well, uncertainty brings out sometimes the worst in people, because there's fear. There's confusion, there's unease, and we all handle uncertainty at different levels. And there's a term for it, uncertainty avoidance. Everyone's got a different level, a different tolerance for uncertainty. And with CQ, we do understand. I think it helps you understand, because different cultures have different, tolerance for that. And I come from a culture in Asia that our tolerance for uncertainty is not very high. And so for us, and even for me today, just even living in America, it's a different. I think there's, I'm talking in general, because each of us on an individual level have different levels of tolerance. But in general, in an environment or a culture like the West, there's a higher level for uncertainty. And I've just reflecting on just the work that I've done in making change, transformation. I've worked on acquisitions, big acquisitions, where you've got one big entity acquiring another, and the level of uncertainty, especially global. And I don't have the rich stories, your stories, Quinton, but I worked on one where we were an American company was acquiring another big, huge company that had big operations in Asia, and I saw the anxiety about job losses, changes in culture. What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my division? Am I going to have a job? And I think, and what it made it, I also learned from that is, you've got to, if you don't have trust, Quinton, you talked about values commitment. If you don't have trust in an organization, if you don't have transparency, if your people don't trust leadership, it actually exaggerates the uncertainty, gets worse because now so you need to build all those beforehand. And if you're and as I've just articulated, if you're dealing with different cultures, and it doesn't even have to be a West and an Eastern culture, even in America, I mean, we see it. If your employees, your team, the people you engage with need to have that trust. So you actually need to build it beforehand, and you need to understand what drives your people, what drives your organization, and that's where that human skill, that we call it soft skill, but really it's an essential skill. That if you are leading a team or leading a group, an organization, and it doesn't have to be multinational. It also means within your community, if you don't have that trust, if you don't develop that beforehand and really understand what triggers your community, what are the things that are important to them, then I think you've got more work to do in a situation where there's a lot of uncertainty. So for me, that's where the cultural intelligence bit comes in, because it's not just about ethnicity. It's not about, whether you're from China or from America. It's really about really building that trust and engagement. And how do you do that? If you understand where the person standing in front of you, where they're coming from, then it gives you that connection, that bridge. The way I describe cultural intelligence, when for folks who, I think a lot of you on the call have some sort of experience, whether you've been trained or you've gone through a workshop on cultural intelligence. I see it as it's a bridge building skill. It's bridge building because it's building across differences. And I've used that in my, I've actually used that. And at one time, before I had the term for it or really understood this whole notion of cultural intelligence, I I grew up in it, but I saw a lot of misunderstandings, a lot of conflicts because people didn't know how to build those bridges, didn't have the skill sets to build those bridges. So for me, that's where I see CQ not as some framework. I see CQ as a life skill. It's actually a very important skill to have to build bridges with people who are different from you. And at the end of the day, we all have differences. You talked about values. You talk about the value systems. We all have different values. We don't assume everyone shares exactly the same values that you have. So how do you bridge that gap?
Thank you, Sharon. And I love, let's say, the metaphor that you used in saying that the CQ is the bridge between people, and you're completely on point that trust comes first, right? In times of uncertainty. And when we are talking about all of this, I start wondering, and kind of I want us to explore that further, because and I believe Sharon already mentioned that in the beginning of this conversation, how CQ is not something that happens overnight. This is a skill set. This is something that we need to work on, right? So what I would love us to explore is, can you talk more about what are the ways that we can apply CQ when we are facing the change or transition or merger or whatever uncertainty in our life is? And I would love to build up on that question on different ways how we apply CQ. We got one of the questions, and that is, what are the best ways to build trust? Can one of you maybe talk about that?
Sharon, do you want to go first, or I've got a knee-jerk response to building trust?
Yes, just jerk that knee.
Okay. So my initial response around building trust and building bridges is, one, we need to realize the need for the bridge, because sometimes we don't realize that there's a problem or that we need to build the bridge. And I think it's Jim Collins that speaks about confronting the brutal facts, but not losing hope that we will prevail in the end. And I think what CQ allows us to do is be able to confront those brutal facts with reality around how do we begin to build these bridges. And so I think that's the first component that I think about when we think about building bridges and building trust. There was something else I wanted to say, but it went out of my mind. So I don't know, Sharon, if you got something to add to that while my brain thinks about what I lost
Yeah,
while we were.
I think, well, my background is communications. So I tend to lean on, and cultural intelligence, communications is very important in building that skill, because at the end of the day, communications it's not just a verbal communications, it's how you act, how you behave, how you treat somebody, and all the other, things that are not, that words you don't need words. So I tend to lean on that when and with that question, yeah, how do you build that trust? First of all, you've Quinton, you hit it. You've got to be able to address what is that gap. If you don't understand, if you don't know the gap, then it's very hard to build that to
Yeah,
build that bridge to connect on the other side. And a lot of it is really, and it takes time. This is not, we move so fast in today's culture. And I say not American culture, just in general, the world is moving very fast. And when things are uncertain, it exacerbates that too, because there's a lot of tension. People are just not, at some level, you default to your crisis mode, and uncertainty can be it comes in many different forms. So it is how you engage with someone. And in the communication world today, we talk a lot about storytelling.
yeah,
What and what how do you know? You need to know the person's story. I mean, they don't have to give you a long story, but you need to know where they're coming from. So you actually do need to take the time. Reflection is a big piece of it. You step back and you look, okay, I'll just use a small example, an example that, I did, that I've gone through. And it is, like when I in my business, business, wearing my business hat, when I would go in and lead teams that are diverse, and I would take the time to get to know the team. And it took time, and sometimes you just have to be very intentional. And I would try and understand what were their pain points, what were the things that bothered them. Um, and I worked for a company, and one of the first things that they would do for a new manager coming in, they would call it new manager assimilation. And they would take the manager out of the room, because you don't assume everyone and everyone is forthright, especially when they don't know you. No one's going to tell you the honest truth. No one's going to share really what is going on, because they are also trying to assess you. So if you're a leader, you need to step back and do that reflection. And they would send the manager out of the room, and they would get the team in, and there would be a facilitator, and they would throw on the board everything that they felt was not right, that they felt that the new manager need to be aware of it to make it right, whether it be collaboration, culture, whatever issues they had. And then so it was a safe space for them to be able to articulate them without feeling that, if they said something out of line, there would be like a check mark against them. And the new manager would come in and go through it. And I think as a leader, it's incumbent on you to set the tone. So there is a responsibility there if you're leading a team, and would go through it, and would, if there were issues that he had an opinion, he or she, like I would have an opinion, and I could share my thoughts, my philosophy, my values, my expectations, what I think would be important. And then after that session, it would be a continuous it became a development plan. And the facilitator would work with the manager outside, once that the session was over. So, and I share this because you need to know the stories of the people you're engaging with. And how do you know? Ask questions. and asking questions as opposed to responding or having judgment. One of the things I do tell people is you got to take your lens off, take your glasses off, put a new glass on. And that's a skill set. And that's where cultural intelligence comes in, because it helps you it helps you do reflection. It helps you think about the questions you ask. It helps you then be able to make that connection or build that bridge across. Empathy is also a big part of it, having that empathy. But a lot of it is just really stepping back. You need to step back, and that's where the reflection, the questions, is very important. So asking the right questions. And what is the right question? Depends on the context, right? It depends on what is it, what are the issues, what is the brutal truth that you are having to face and deal with. And it's a learning, and it's a journey. And I don't pretend to be to have got there, because my journey has no end.
I think it's for all of us, right? It's a never ending journey. And Sharon, I believe, asking right questions is definitely a thing. And then I also love observing, just observe what people do in in uncertainty, how they behave. I will just give example from my personal life being here in the region. Some people go quiet. They, love taking everything to themselves. Other people are seeking connection, are seeking check-ins, are seeking, some support. And we all kind of react differently in times of uncertainty. And I think I did even tell you the story about my husband's work. A lot of people there are local people who have gone through different types of uncertainty that this region went through in the past. And then he has one colleague from Australia who found himself in these uncertain times in the couple of last months, and it was so difficult for him to go through that. And to both of your points, I think it's so important to know the background and where people come from, because that shapes how they approach uncertainty, how they react, and it shapes their needs in these situations. So thank you both for that reflection. And while we are talking about it, Sharon, you now mentioned it just a few minutes ago, but also before that. In these times of uncertainty, skills like empathy or communication, trust building, these are all critical skill. Like without that, we cannot bridge, and we cannot connect with people. We cannot make them feel safe. We cannot move forward. We cannot support people. To my point from the beginning of this conversation, how it's not only important how we deal with uncertainty, but it's critical to know how to support others. Why do you both think, we already touched based on that, but why do you think the CQ is kind of key soft skill? And maybe we can talk a bit about how it's often labeled as a soft skill, which can sometimes, I know, unintentionally minimize the importance, right, compared to some technical skills. But I think it's very important to address this topic, because we are in this world where skills such as cultural intelligence are just critical, and at the same time, they've seen as soft skills. Can you talk to that point?
So I think I saw a question around, which talks to what you're talking, Ava, around how does different dimensions of CQ apply to uncertainty. And so maybe to be like more concrete around how CQ helps. For me, it's CQ drive. When things are really uncertain and I don't know whether I can get through this. For me, it's when I tap into my motivation. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Even though it's really difficult, if I always go back to my why and what feeds me in this and what's driving me and motivating me, that becomes a real helper to get through the uncertainty. So for me, that would be like, if I'm answering the question from that perspective, I think sometimes we've misunderstood soft skills versus hard skills. The other day, somebody asked me, is CQ a technical skill then? I'm like, oh gosh, so now I've got technical skills, I've got hard skills, I've got soft skills. And sometimes we don't really fully appreciate where these terminologies come from. And so I think soft skills came from World War II. If you weren't driving a tank or holding a gun, that was a hard metal thing. Anything else was a soft skill. And I think over time, we've allowed soft skills and hard skills to be really different from each other. But I think in the world that we live in today, CQ is more than just the soft skill that is a nice to have. It's imperative to be effective in any kind of work that we're doing, particularly when we're dealing with all these wonderful things that are happening around us all the time.
Amazing. Thank you, Quentin. Sharon, anything to add? I know you're passionate about this topic.
I am.
And Quentin, thank you for giving us that background where I was not aware where soft skill terminology comes from. So I think it's very valuable to know. Sharon.
Yeah, Quentin, I actually went up and looked up, and you're right. It started in the army. It was coined, and they had tried to differentiate between the technical skills was the operation, anything to do with ammunitions, metals, and the
Yes.
soft skill was leadership, management, and there was one more thing. And what they also realized that without the soft skills, you couldn't have the technical skills because you need
Yes,
the
correct.
leadership, the management. And then I think it was in the 80s where it morphed into the corporate world where people just used it as,
Yeah.
but anyway, I think just for me, you mentioned you use CQ Drive. I tend to gravitate to CQ strategy, and
Okay.
which is what awareness, thinking, planning for it, awareness and planning when you're going into, and I tend to do that. And I'm more, and we had talked about uncertainty and how in different cultures, I come from a culture where information is very important. When it's uncertain, we need as much information, as much guidance. People do not like ambiguity.
Yeah.
They need to know. They need to know, and as I said, that's where the trust comes in. Because if they don't trust you, whatever you say, it's not going to resonate. But so I tend to go into the planning and thinking about it, and part of it is really going beyond. You got to consider the impact of what you're trying to achieve as opposed to just the intention of it. What is the impact?
Yes.
What are you trying to get? What are you trying to achieve with this person, with this team, in my organization? So that's where I find CQ. So, that it's, and the other thing that also that I've actually thought about with regards to CQ, it is a fluid, it's a skill set. So it's fluid. It's not, for those of you who have gone, who understand CQ or am aware of it, the framework, it's like you don't have to start from one frame, one first step one, and then a step two. It's fluid because how we work, how we deal in this world is also fluid. Nothing is static, and it changes. So for me, that's where CQ has helped because it's a skill set that allows you to change, to adapt, and to navigate. And I go back to some of the concrete things is you develop your ability to reflect a lot better, to observe a lot better, to even really be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. A lot of people talk about EQ. I've got EQ. Of course, EQ helps, but if you step back and think about your EQ is developed within your environment that you grew up in, that you were
Yeah.
conditioned. So, and I said, I gave the early example about my identity. When I go back, I've lived here for so long that I have been conditioned to be more, you want to call American Western. And when I go home, people do say that because I will like silly things. I'll go to a restaurant and I'll order something and I said, I don't want this, I don't want that, hold this, hold that. That's very American because you customize everything. And people will look at me and say, well, do you want to go somewhere else to get your food? You know, like, you know, you know, and it's just up to a simple a gesture or behavior. And even the way I think and look at, you know, when I go home, I have to remind myself sometimes, hey, you know, I'm back in this environment. Go rewind, you know, take some of the things that you are thinking, or you've got to change the lens. I myself have to remind myself of having to do that. So for me, that's where it's a skill set, because you're constantly refining it, and you're aware of it, because a lot of times we're not aware. But CQ helps you to be more aware of yourself and how you're responding to something and how you're interpreting it as well.
Yeah, I just want to go back to something you said, Sharon, that I've been wrestling with for a couple of months actually, is this idea of intentionality versus impact. And so I think that there are leaders that I work with that have pure intentions of making decisions about me, about my role, and the intention is pure, but the impact of that has a massive knock-on effect around how I show up in my family, this, that, and that. And when I challenge that, they come to me and say, but my intention was this. And I think CQ helps me begin to think about what is the impact of what I'm doing on people rather than just my intentions. Because I think we were driven so much by our intentions that we might get blinded by these good intentions that actually have really bad consequences for other people. So thank you for reminding me and helping me reframe that. So that was really great.
Yeah, thank you both. Thank you both. I was while you were talking, I cannot stop kind of looking, and we are getting a lot of questions. So I'm trying to follow and to kind of tie them to what we just discussed. We have one question in the chat. Somebody is asking, does CQ enable empathy with people whose values or principles that are diametrically opposed to our own? If so, how? Would you be able to talk to that point? And it's I mean, we already covered quite a lot, but the question is more about how do we show empathy for people whose principle and values are opposite to our own. And I think it comes to everything that you two were saying, and how CQ is not, you know, a book that you get, you read it,
Yeah.
you learn it, and then magically now you know what to do with every person. It's more about really knowing what we need to be effective, and as Sharon was saying, reflecting all the time wherever you are, even if you're coming to the culture that you're familiar with or the culture you're coming from, you need to be aware and reflect all the time. Anything you two would love to add on that?
So I remember having a conversation with somebody that was fighting against apartheid in South Africa a couple of years back. And he was a union member and he fought against apartheid. And he said to me, Quinton, something that was really important for us during the fight against apartheid was the importance of your voice. And so when we were in meetings, if somebody was in that meeting that saw the world very differently to me, that was directly opposed to me, the fundamental thing that drove us was I would, even if I disagreed with you, if somebody shut your voice down, I would fight for your voice to be heard. And I think sometimes when we think about uncertainty and people that think oppositely to the way we think, we tend to shut them down. And I think that's why we're living in this polarized world that we live in right now, is because we haven't allowed voices that we disagree with to be at the table. And so when Sharon disagrees with me, I need to shut her down. I need to do a whole bunch of things that doesn't allow her voice to be heard. And when her voice doesn't get heard, it leaks out like a sponge. It leaks out in other ways. And so I think it's really, really important that as CQ practitioners and people that are on this call, that we fight for everyone's right to have their voice at the table, even if I disagree with it. But it's through those disagreements that I begin to challenge myself. And so I've often thought, and I think this is maybe where I'm getting to around this, is that when I get frustrated with somebody, so we're on this call, Eva, you say something that I disagree with immensely. I need to stop and ask myself, why am I feeling so frustrated by what Eva is saying? Because it's actually not about you. It's more about me. And I need to start asking myself the questions. What is it about who you are and what you're saying is impacting me? When I've asked myself those questions, I began to think and see the world differently, and I've showed up as a different person. But if I'm always with people that agree with me and have the same values as me, I probably am not learning and I'm not going to make the world a better place. And so often I've had to push myself to be in rooms with people that see the world very differently to me and to learn to keep quiet. I was going to say another word, but I need to be quiet and learn. And so
Yeah,
I think what CQ does, it creates the space between a reaction. It allows me to step back and see the world a little bit differently before I respond. And I think in this uncertainty, we tend to respond really quickly. Um,
yes.
I, I say something, you disagree with it without thinking about it. You already got the story that you want to share around how you disagree with me, and you've rehearsed it 100 times. And so you're just going to jump straight in, and we don't create the space to think and reflect on what the other person is saying.
So true. So true. Sharon,
Yeah,
did I
you know,
cut you off? I'm
Chintan,
sorry.
yeah, I mean, I'm just going to add to it because I'm with you. You know, of course, here, you know, the politics and just I'll share a personal story. I have very dear friends who have a different political view to mine. And I've and it's actually exactly what you said. When we are together, and that's where the CQ strategy comes in. When I know I'm getting together with people who don't share, I do think before I even get in. I actually do think about it. I think and I think, okay, how am I going to respond if this person said this or whatever? And that has helped me. And so it is listening that you know as a communications person I talk a lot, so I'm very verbal. My
We wouldn't
strength
have
is
known
verbal
that. I don't think we
my
realized that.
strength is verbal communication. But but and it's made and I have and yeah I have sat back, I've listened, I've asked questions, I have really, you know, and after the conversation, after the interaction, I do reflect on it because, and I go back to what is the impact that we're trying? Are we all wanting the same thing, but we're coming in at different angles, different perspectives? So my political leanings is my political leanings based on my values and you know whatever drives, you know, whether it be an issue or something. Yours is yours. So how do we have the conversation? But at the end of the day, are we trying, do we want the same thing? And I saw a quick pop-up on the chat about humanity. We, at the end of the day, I believe, and maybe I'm a bit naive, that we actually, at the end of the day, want the same things. And I've lived and I'm no expert, I'm not a world traveler, but I've lived enough in different cultures and people where the more I travel, the more I get out of my bubble, the more I realize we actually all want the same things. There's a common desire and need. But, you know, so I've also learned to step back, you know, listen a lot more and ask the questions. You know, and for me, it's always, yeah, why? Why do you think that way? Why do you think, you know, you support this particular whatever candidate or whatever? And why? And it gives people a chance to at least explain. And to your point, then you're not responding because we do have, and it does trigger us sometimes when it's something that is really, we're passionate with, it does trigger us. So how do you manage and step back? Not easy. I wouldn't say that every single moment I get it right, but I'm better at it you know, each time I'm faced with someone who has a completely different approach to their thinking, their values, and all that. And so it's one thing that you do have to be at some level quite conscious of it because if you react, then we're reacting based on the response that we've just been conditioned as well. So we're not taking it, we're not going deeper than we should. So,
Exactly. And it's always best to pause, right? To
yeah,
pause and reflect. And I think, after everything that you two shared, the one thing that stands out is that cultural intelligence is all about ongoing practice, ongoing practice. We need to pause, reflect on experiences, but also to Quinton's point, even go through some discomfort, and to be able to understand where other people are coming from. And I would love to. We only have 10 minutes left. I don't know where this time went, to be honest. But the one thing that I would love us for the end of this conversation to reflect on is, why is it important to understand your personal why for CQ? What is that kind of keeps people engaged in this work over time? And we know that we have people, as Sharon mentioned, people who are listening to us now who's been through CQ journey in one or the other way, and two of you are representatives of that. And I know that what I'm asking you right now is kind of beautifully connects to one learning journey that both of you are involved in. And I would love you to share more on that as well with our audience today.
So the learning journeys that you're speaking about actually comes out of a time when I just finished a session, and I got negative feedback, not because the session was bad, but because somebody didn't like what I said during the engagement, and I got negative feedback, and it wasn't the first time, and I was just tired. And I think I said to Sharon a couple of times, at some point, I just want to talk about butterflies and trees. I don't want to talk about this anymore. And I was feeling despondent, and I was feeling like I was coming to the end of where I was at with CQ. And so I went on a retreat with David Livermore, with the CQ fellows, and somehow engaging with other CQ practitioners reignited something that was inside of me. And then I started thinking about, how do I create experiences for people that can reignite the passion of why they do what they're doing. And so I started developing these learning journeys. And so if you've been with me on a course, and I've listened to you, and I'm apologizing to David Livermore here, I don't remember what David Livermore said in my first accreditation program. I do remember side conversations I had with him. I do remember having conversations with people in different spaces, and said, so I've thought about, how do I create an experience that will be memorable for people years to come? And so these learning journeys have come out of that, around creating experiences. So today was great. We got an opportunity to speak to 159 people around the world. But there's something missing around having a personal interaction with 159 people that were on the call. And something magical happens when we stand at a tea station and talk about something that wasn't related to the program. And so Sharon and myself have put a learning journey together this year in Penang, Malaysia, where we have space for 20 people to come together to either reignite your passion for cultural intelligence, either to introduce you to people in the space that have never engaged in the space before, or just engage with the beautiful place that Sharon comes from. And Sharon will be able to talk about why we chose Penang as our space where we want to have these conversations. But yeah, we're really looking forward to hosting some CQ practitioners to reignite you, to reimagine what CQ could potentially look like for you. And I know for myself, the first time I went to Southeast Asia, I was blown away by how little I knew about cultural intelligence until it was in my face. And so, yeah, Sharon, you want to add to our learning journey that's happening in Penang?
Yeah, and just to add on to what you said, though, cultural intelligence is not a book. It's not you go in a meeting and then you walk out and you've done, you've checked the box. Really, it's like I equate it to exercise. You build your muscle. You build your muscle, and you actually reprogram how you think, your neurons. And there is an aspect of neuroscience in it as well, because you're really reprogramming how you think and all that. And so it's an immersive learning. So the way to build that muscle is to get out of your comfort zone, go somewhere different, be immersed in a culture that is not like yours. That is where you will see the skills that you're building, and you're tapping into it. And the reason with Penang, as I said when I introduced myself, Malaysia is really a multicultural country. We've gone through our own history. We have the British, we have the Japanese, and that has all created the history and the heritage of the, especially Penang Island, has created a society and a community that has at some level been able to bridge a lot of the differences. We have Muslims, we have Buddhists, we have Hindus, we had a Jewish community as well. So it's really as I said, multicultural. It's also a UNESCO heritage site. So what we are hoping to do is let people see that a culture is built on so many layers: the history, the experience, the people, the language. Then you have the food. So we chose Penang because it does provide the context for really building cultural intelligence and and really experiencing it.
This is amazing. And from my perspective, I can only say that I can relate to what you two are saying. Get out there, experience culture. Before I moved to UAE just recently, I read books, I got myself ready, and I thought, I'm ready, But the reality hit me when I came here that I'm not ready whatsoever, and that whatever I read completely gets different dimension when you see it in person, when you are there to experience it, to touch it. So for everyone who is listening to us, if you just want to continue your learning journey on cultural intelligence, different cultures, and you're free from September 20th to 25th, please contact Quinton and Sharon for this amazing experience. And who knows, maybe we see each other there. Yeah, I would love to thank everyone. We do have some questions about costs, and we will make sure to come back to you on your questions. I know that we had more questions that we didn't answer today in the chat, but we will follow up with everyone. And make sure that we follow up on those questions. If you want to learn more about cultural intelligence, please visit our website, culturalq.com, or write to us at info@culturalq.com. And also for everyone, thank you so much for your time. Feel free to reach out to me personally, and also Quinton and Sharon for any questions regarding this learning experience, but also everything that we shared with you today. And yeah, we hope you enjoyed it. We wish you all a great day, and thank you for being with us today.